konnichiwa. Today, we're going to talk about some more of those things that hit us between the eyes as soon as we leave the walled garden of theoretical Japanese and venture into the wild woods of the real thing. One of the things people often ask me about are the various sentence enders they encounter, and I'm not talking about the tame ones like na, yo, and na. I've done a video about those if you're interested, and I'll pop a link for that over my head. But today we're going to talk about some of the more colloquial and unconventional sentence enders that you're going to run into once you get into wild Japanese in anime, manga, etc. So one of the ones I often get asked about is kai, and kai is simply a softened and colloquial form of ka. As we know, ka is regularly used in formal Japanese, where we use the desumasu decorations at the end of sentences to form questions. So we say, nani nani shimasu ka, nani nani desu ka. But in colloquial Japanese, we don't use ka as a sentence and a question marker all that often. We do use it in other positions, and I've done a video about the various ways we use ka, and I'll pop a link for that over my head too. But where we don't tend to use it in informal speech on the whole is at the end of sentences, marking questions, the way it does in desumasu Japanese. And that's not because it's ungrammatical. In fact, it's perfectly grammatical. But in modern Japanese, it's come to sound a little bit rough. So when you may hear it between men who are being one of the boys together, you don't hear it so often in female speech or in the speech of anyone who's trying to be a bit courteous. So what do we do? Most of the time is simply use a rising intonation in speech or a question mark in writing where we're depicting casual speech, and there's nothing wrong with this. Spanish continually makes questions by simply adding a rising intonation to the equivalent statement, and there are no problems there. There are no problems in Japanese either. Sometimes we add no, which is ambiguous because it can mark either a question or a statement. But again, that doesn't really matter because intonation works just as well. However, we do have the informal, non-rough sounding question marker, kai. You might think that will be used all the time, but it isn't, because it sounds very colloquial indeed, and sometimes a little bit, well, folksy. Some sources say that it's primarily masculine, and that's kind of halfway true. You don't hear many younger female speakers using it, but you do sometimes hear older female speakers using it. Kai also has, well, partner, which is dai. Dai is really da plus kai. So this is the form of kai that we use in copula ending sentences, da ending sentences. And just about everything I've said about kai also applies to dai, except that there is a particular collocation, dodai, which is much more widely used. So if somebody's eating something and you say dodai, what's it like? How is it? And they might say, oishii. Or they might say manzui. But askage in that form is something anybody can do, provided it's an informal setting. People also come across the expression chodai, and that's not related to kai or dai at all. It's an informal equivalent to kudasai, so it's usually adding it to the cha form of a verb to ask someone to do something. It's sometimes considered to be female speech, but it is not exclusively so. Finally, real sentence ender markers in casual speech are ze, zo, and sa. Now, they and zo are very simple. They are just verbal exclamation marks which lend a little force to whatever it is you're saying. They're quite rough and really are masculine speech, and they're the sort of thing you'll probably see more in anime and manga than you will in real life. Sa is similar, but it's not nearly so rough. It's much more widely used, you'll see a lot of it, and you'll hear it in real life. It tends to get called masculine speech, but again, it's not exclusively masculine speech. All kinds of people use it. It's important not to confuse sa, the emphasis lending sentence ender, to sa, which comes at the beginning of a sentence and is more of a pause for thought kind of expression. Now, there are also sentence enders that are not sentence enders, but effectively they are, because people do put them after the engine at the end of a sentence. One of these is kara. Now, kara, as you know, is not technically a sentence ender. What it is a conjunction that joins two logical clauses to make a compound sentence. So a proper use of kara might be sakura ga konai kara kaerimasu, which means because Sakura isn't coming, I'm going home. Sakura isn't coming, so I'm leaving. So you might simply say as you are leaving, Sakura ga konai kara, and that is just leaving the other half of the sentence unsaid because it's obvious. Now, from that, kara can be added to a lot of sentences to imply that something else is coming. That extra something else isn't always in fact, the kara may be performing the function of either softening what it marks or hardening it. It can soften it by making the statement feel explanatory. It can harden it by making it sound as if it's part of a logical argument or a natural piece of reasoning that the hearer ought to understand and agree with. So, for example, if you're riding your bicycle in a place where you shouldn't be riding a bicycle, and somebody official comes up to you and says, "Detention ni noru no wa kinshi desu kara." That's conciliatory, and really all they want to say is, it's forbidden to ride a bicycle around here, but by adding the kara to the end of it, they're kind of softening it, turning it into an explanation for you. Conversely, they might say, "Detention ni noru no wa kinshi desu kara," and that has a different implication. There, the kinshi is being rammed home all the harder for that term. So kara can have a variety of uses, often depending on context, on the way in which they're said, and the demeanor of the person saying them, and on the whole situation. So is another very common sentence-ending particle which is similar to kara and has a meaning in the same area. She can actually combine various conditions or statements, but its most common and regular use is to combine reasons. So, for example, we might say, "Osoku natta shi, sakura ga konai shi, kaerimasu." And that means, because it's gotten late, because Sakura isn't coming, I'm going home. And this is the most standard kind of use of she. But then we might often use it for only one condition, implying others. For example, if we said, "Osoku natta shi, kaerimasu," we're saying, because it's gotten late, I'm going home. But we're also implying that the fact that it's gotten late isn't the only reason. Because it's gotten late and for other reasons, then they home. And this, in this particular case, probably implies that it's not just because it's getting late, it's also because Sakura isn't coming, but we're leaving unstated the more personal part of it. Now, conversely, we might say, "Sakura ga konai shi, kaerimasu," and this time we've put in the most important part, the real reason for our leaving, but by saying she rather than kara, we're also saying, because Sakura isn't coming and for other reasons, I'm leaving. What this does is take the pressure off Sakura, although she may be the main reason, and diffusing it a bit by suggesting that there are also other reasons. And we might do this when there are no other reasons at all, just as a way of softening and diffusing the statement. Another example might be, suppose you're riding your bicycle again in that place where you shouldn't be riding it, and this time a friend comes up to you and says, Jitension in order no wa kinshi shi. Now, the difference between this and the Tara statement is simply that the she is diffusing it. It's saying, oh, because it's forbidden to ride a bicycle here and for other reasons. Now, there aren't any other reasons at all, but what this does is make it sound a bit more colloquial, a bit more friendly, and it lays up a bit that kara, which can sound too much like an order. It's just saying, oh, for that and other reasons. And this vaguing up tactic often takes place in languages. In English, it's often done by adding words like or kinda to what you're saying. Now, the ways in which these sentence enders work can't be learned from structure alone or from abstract instruction alone. We need to immerse in Japanese to get the feel of what people mean when they say these things. But conversely, understanding the structure, understanding how they really fit together, gives us a substantial boost in being able to make sense of our immersion. It's rather like a rope and climbing a mountain. If you have a rope, that will help you climb the mountain. But if you just stand staring at the rope and learning all about the rope, you'll never get to the top of the mountain. Conversely, if you try to climb the mountain without the rope, you may not get very far. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments below, and I will answer as usual. I'd like to thank my Gold Kokeshi patrons, my supporter angels who make these videos possible, and all my angels on Patreon, and my supporters everywhere. And I'd like to thank you for attending this lesson. これからもよろしくお願いします。Trust is rest.